Hi, my name's Gemma Dhami and I'm the Museums Learning Manager at Museums Worcestershire, and today I'm going to talk to you about volunteer recruitment. There's already loads of really good resources out there to help you with volunteer recruitment, so what I'm going to do today with this film is just give you some key things to consider to help you on your way with starting with volunteer recruitment. Think about where you could go specifically within Worcestershire to support you, and also just signpost you to some really good resources out there that can help as well. Having volunteers can be very rewarding for you and your volunteers. It can provide fresh ideas, ways of working, give skills and opportunities to people in your community and further afield, and give the community ownership and involvement with your organisation. Most people volunteer because they support you as a museum and what you're doing, and because they want to help. So you need to make sure you meet the needs of volunteers as well as your organisation. Museums Worcestershire is an organisation with paid staff that also has volunteers, but the information in this film is relevant to volunteer-run organisations too. So, is your organisation ready to recruit? There are a few tasks to undertake within your organisation before you begin to recruit. With volunteering, you need to think about recruitment with the right people into the right roles. They have a crucial part to play in our museums, and finding the right role for someone will give them the opportunity to really flourish. There are some key questions to ask before undertaking new or reviewed volunteer recruitment work. You can start with, have you thought about consulting with existing staff and volunteers? Has everyone received the necessary training and support within your organisation? Is it in your forward plan or your business plan? Are your board or management committee on board with this? This is so important. You'll need them to help make decisions on things like expenses, the kinds of roles that will be relevant within your organisation, and most importantly, the importance of volunteers is understood at every level within your organisation. All of these things need to be considered if you want to feel prepared for recruiting new volunteers or taking a new approach to recruiting volunteers. So, getting your policies and procedures ready. This isn't the most exciting part of recruiting volunteers, but something that's really necessary to make sure you're ready. Lots of the policies you need for volunteers, your organisation will already have. There are lots of things bespoke for volunteer recruitment to ensure that not only do you recruit in the right way, but also provide support for volunteers in their time with you. So the documents you need to think about specifically for volunteers. Firstly, there's the volunteer application form. This needs to gather all of the information that you need so you can make an informed decision about recruiting a new volunteer. Then there's your volunteer reference questions. These are so you can do a character reference when you take on a new volunteer. And it's really important that you keep these questions the same, so it's a fair process when you're recruiting new volunteers. Then there's your volunteer handbook. All the information that a volunteer needs to know about your organisation and what it means to volunteer there. Then there's your volunteer policy. So this is actually your internal document about how you work with volunteers and how you support them. Your induction checklist. This is what you'll go through on the first day of volunteering with a new volunteer, so they feel welcomed, but also so they feel fully informed and know exactly what they're going to be doing and where to go. Your emergency contact information for a new volunteer is really important to keep as well. Obviously, this is personal data, so it needs to be stored correctly. Your confidentiality agreement. For any volunteers that are working with information that might be sensitive, it's important that they complete one of these. And finally, your support and supervision form. This is for keeping records of any one-to-ones, and any volunteers who are with you for a longer period of time need to undertake these. So then we've got the documents that you will already have within your organisation that apply to volunteers too. Firstly, your safeguarding policy. Especially if volunteers are working with young people or vulnerable adults, and you need to ensure that we've got the right training in place for them as well with this. There's the code of conduct, your equality and diversity policy, which could also be your access policy. Risk assessments, which can apply to their specific role, but can also apply to just their volunteering on site, which is what all volunteers will undertake. Your health and safety policy and your foreign emergency procedures. There's some really good places to find templates for these already out there on the internet. The Group for Education and Museum have a volunteer organisers toolkit you can download, or if you visit your local museum development provider, they'll have lots of information too. To really explore this in more detail and the process, the Association for Independent Museums has guidance on successfully recruiting and retaining volunteers, which goes into this in much more detail. So now you need to think about having the right roles for your museum. There's quite a few things to consider when creating role profiles. You start off thinking about what kind of roles you can provide. So there's lots of different kinds of volunteering opportunities you can think about that could suit your organisation and volunteers. Firstly, there's project volunteers. So, for example, Museums Worcestershire runs the Suitcase Stories project, where we work with volunteers, specifically working with people living with dementia and their carers. This project has got a beginning, middle and an end, so it means it's very flexible and a volunteer knows that they can start and end. There's occasional volunteer opportunities, so this could be events where you only have a few a year. It could be off-site, it could be groups of volunteers, which could be something specific. So with Museums Worcestershire, we have collections volunteers who work as a group, sort of one day a month, or it could be one-off to achieve a specific goal, so coming in to help you clear leaves or work at a specific part of the year. There's also micro-volunteering, which generally refers to no commitment, cost-free actions that take less than 30 minutes to complete. And also there's remote volunteering as well, which is much more flexible, where people can volunteer from home. There are two ways to approach planning volunteer roles. You can have identified opportunities that you specifically recruit for, so you know you want a visitor welcome volunteer and an events volunteer. Or you can have a more ad hoc approach where you try and find opportunities where a volunteer contacts you and you have a discussion about what would meet their needs and yours. Ideally, you find a way to do both, but if you have reduced capacity, a much more focused approach would work well. There are some excellent examples of role profiles from museums on the internet, but the main thing is to remember to keep it flexible. Volunteers don't need to have a degree to come to your museum. They need to have passion, enthusiasm and a willingness to learn, and your role profile should reflect this. There's some things to think about when writing a role description, and you can ask yourself some questions to help you put this together. Would I like to do this role, and what would attract me to it? What would I get out of it if I were a volunteer? What training would I need? What sort of person or sort of skills would be needed to fill this role? And how could I measure success? Remember, however, that a volunteer is given their time for free. It's unacceptable to be too demanding, and being more open-minded about attendance is a huge bonus for prospective volunteers. You cannot expect a volunteer to do absolutely everything and anything. However, you can ask them to respect their position within the organisation and take it seriously. Examples of role profiles will be available through the toolkit that's associated with this film as well. So now I'm just going to go through a few case studies from Museums Worcestershire. Firstly, I'm going to talk about Volunteers at Home. A groundbreaking new project, Volunteers at Home gives access to the isolated through volunteering. This work uses remote volunteering opportunities, bringing a flexible approach to volunteers who are unable to come on site. Funded by Esme Fairbairn to look at providing opportunities for volunteers during the pandemic, this project brings collections into volunteers' homes to support our curatorial team, develop new skills and enjoy a social aspect of volunteering through online platforms to support well-being. Wishing to still provide opportunities for volunteers, we believe that if we could find ways to help our current volunteers through isolation, then we could make a difference and still continue to deliver on the important work of caring for our collections. Our solution was to devise a way of safely allowing our volunteers to take museum objects into their own homes and continue with object research, cataloguing and conservation work. This work has changed how Museums Worcestershire works with volunteers, providing flexible opportunities and much more accessible ways of volunteering. Our other example are volunteers on site at our Worcestershire County Museum. The Worcestershire County Museum at Hartlebury Castle has a long history of working with volunteers, embedded in the heart of everything we do. We recruit volunteers to undertake a number of roles at Hartlebury, all identified as meaningful experiences that are mutually beneficial to volunteers and to the museum. Our events volunteers have the flexibility of joining us for a few big events through the year, whilst our activity volunteers helping out during half term to keep families enjoying their visit through fun crafts. We have workshop volunteers who have created and restored gypsy bardos, and learning volunteers supporting our important work with schools. The exciting thing about our volunteers isn't just the role they were recruited to do, but all of the special extra things they bring to that continue to amaze us. Their creativity helps shape our half-term activity planning, and their amazing expertise in the workshop has created new interactives across our site. Because of the brilliant experience our volunteers have at the Worcestershire County Museum, they spread the word of us across the local area. More volunteers join us, and more people get to come and experience this gem of local and national history. So, you're ready to start recruiting? How to find volunteers? First thing to think about is whether you are able to do digital and physical volunteer recruitment. The ideal situation is that you're able to do both of these things, but they do both have pros and cons. But if you're only able to undertake one, that's okay. The other can be something that you aim for and build into your forward planning. With digital recruitment, it is free and far-reaching and you can design it yourself, but there's still a large number of people unable to access online, so you will miss a lot of potential volunteers. With physical recruitment, it can be time-consuming to set up and deliver and will have a print or advertising cost. This could be paying to have something designed and printed, or for a paid advert in a local paper or publication, but you will get great coverage, and it also doubles as raising awareness of your museum in places that may not normally have your leaflets. Obviously, your search can be streamlined if you were appealing to a certain group. If an opportunity is quite specific, you could target groups of a similar interest. We have active youth VA groups in Worcestershire, for example. It could be college courses offering something similar, or certain sections of your local library. Consider the words you use carefully. Ads which simply say volunteers wanted will probably not catch the eye of someone who has never volunteered before. In order to draw someone in who's new to volunteering, emphasise the benefits of volunteering to that individual. Of course, a good starting point is always holding a volunteer open day and inviting people to your site. It's always a really good selling point. So a really good activity to undertake before you start either digital or physical recruitment is a mapping exercise. So for physical locations, this is mainly for roles that would be based at your site. You'd say start within 5 or 10 miles of your museum. It's really helpful to use an online map service such as Google Maps or OpenStreetMaps. The kinds of places you should consider are places that will be most likely to display a poster or a leaflet that has public access. Look at cafes, libraries, adult education centres, TICs, healthcare locations. This could be dentists or GPs, or even retirement villages. Think about how you'll be delivering these posters out. Do you have the capacity, and what do you need to do to make it happen? Create yourself a spreadsheet of who you're going to, put their contact details in there and any other key information that will help you planning. For the digital recruitment, most importantly, have a place on your website dedicated to volunteers. Anyone actively searching in your area is more likely to inquire if they can get more information while they're researching. Museums Worcestershire has a webpage that you can visit and get an idea of how this could look. doit.org is a great way to attract volunteers who are already looking for volunteer opportunities online, and see if your local council and community centres have a mailing list you're able to share opportunities on. See if your local college or university can help. For the University of Worcester, they have a student union which has a volunteering website, which has been great to support some of the opportunities that we have and get a different audience. For social media mapping, on Twitter, identify local hashtags that you can get involved in, such as Worcestershire Hour. On Facebook, search out local groups. For example, in Malvern, there's a Malvern Hills display board and a Malvern Hills community notice board. Each of these have got thousands of followers. If you have a link to your website or share an image of a recruitment poster, you could really capture a large audience here. For more information and more in-depth support around marketing, you can see our other films on digital marketing and social media, and our film on marketing planning. Success is more than just more volunteers within your organisation. Obviously that's a big part of it, but real success lies within real change within your organisation. It's really important to see your work with volunteers as long-term and not just a quick fix. Every 6 to 12 months you should undertake an evaluation, see if your needs have changed, see if your volunteers' needs have changed, and change your planning to reflect this. But if you have happy volunteers who continue to come back and volunteer with you and more volunteers join you, that's the real sign of success. This has been a Museums Worcestershire production in partnership with Historic England.